I'd like
to call this meeting of the Madison Public School Board of Education open. Let's pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So next is our school/community session, where we invite any public participation. Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to speak? Anyone online? Okay. Next is our Board of Education student representatives.
Good evening, everyone. We want to start off by saying over the weekend, our spring sports officially started. And today there was the Captain's Council where all the varsity captains went to a conference and discussed ethical leadership and how to best represent their varsity teams. So we're wishing them all good luck with their upcoming seasons. And then the National Honor Society applications are now open for juniors. I would encourage anyone eligible to apply. And then on that note, we are still in the works of establishing the World Language Honor Society. We're hopeful to get it started my year so that individuals can be inducted before graduation, but most likely it will take place Kate's year for the class of 2027. But exciting to give recognition to individuals who excel in foreign language. And then last Friday, scholarships were due for seniors. There were over 50 available for anyone to apply from the class of 2026. And we just wanted to thank the community sponsors and the donors who are able to make those scholarships possible. And then the last one, I wanted to talk about Independent Project, which I know is a course that the board helped put in place a few years ago, but this is my first experience with Independent Project. It's a required course, as you guys know, but I just wanted to shine some light on it because I wasn't really aware of what went into Independent Project. Like I said, I haven't been required to or had the opportunity to take it yet, but it's just such an amazing opportunity for students to pursue honestly any of their interests. We have 12 weeks to kind of dive into anything that we're interested in. And this week we went to the Fab Lab, which is a little room in the library, and just the machinery that we have available. There's places to embroider, there's sewing machines, things for videography and photography. There's green screens, ring lights. It looks like a whole TV production. And there was also places to engrave metal. There's wood cutting, places to do vinyls and posters and stickers. There's just so much available to students. And I think we're really appreciative that we have this creative outlet and an opportunity to dive into anything we're interested in aside from academics. So I'm taking up needle pointing, which I never thought that I would do, but it gives me an opportunity to kind of decompress before the start of my academic day, as I have it as first period. But I have friends learning how to do guitar and learning how to build certain things. And yeah, so I think it's been a really positive experience so far, and just so cool to see how much is available to students. I honestly wish I would have discovered it earlier because I could have used those stickers for Make-A-Wish Club, but yeah, it's really cool. So yeah.
Yeah, and then trimester 2 exams are finally over. They took place Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of last week, and then trimester 3 started last Friday. So we're now kind of in the home stretch of the year. I know students have some schedule changes now in terms of just dropping some of their old classes and gaining some new classes. So yeah, it's just spring now. Hopefully the weather will get warmer, and it'll be a good end to the year. Juniors, in terms of next week and the following week, have the SAT and NGSS testing. So next week on Wednesday, for the first 3 hours of the day, it gets split up. So the first, I believe it goes by it's alphabetical by last names. So the first half of the junior class will take the SAT, and the other half of the class will take NGSS, and then the following week they reverse. So we'll be there for the first 3 hours, and all other grades have a nice delay. So I hope they enjoy some extra sleeping time while I'll be taking those tests, unfortunately.
So great.
I used to feel that way when I was
Yeah.
a sophomore in the chairs, and then Vibe has their season finale show tomorrow at 7 p.m. So they've had an amazing competition season, and they'll be ending it with one last show at Daniel Hand just to showcase their show one more time. They did it at the beginning of their season and now just wrapping it up. So I've always been encouraging anyone to go see it because it was such an amazing show and they had such an amazing run this year at competition.
Yeah, absolutely. And a final thing is students have organized a blood drive next Tuesday, and they did it in partnership with the Red Cross, but very cool to see students giving back to the community. So if anyone's interested in donating blood, that's next Tuesday.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? I know that the independent study, yeah, we started that, I think it was 3 academic years ago.
Oh, I think it's been,
Really took that, wow.
at least prior to 2020, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I know that a lot of students do Fab Lab activities, but we've had students that have gone and done like full-blown internships at local businesses. We've had students who have grown businesses on their own, like in like entrepreneurial pursuits. It's been amazing. So I'm glad to hear that you're enjoying it as well, but
Yeah,
it's been like a really excellent addition to our program, I think.
absolutely. And it's so cool to see students just kind of fully dive into the opportunities available and take full advantage of the resources. And there's also a $50 grant available to students. Mr. Salutary sponsored that, I believe, to buy resources or materials necessary for the project. So definitely great to feel supported, and I'm excited to see how my stitching goes.
Thanks. Thank you very much. You guys are.
I think we're gonna stay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome. Okay, next, the superintendent's report, Dr. Cook.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Klaskin. So every 2 years, we are fortunate to work hand in hand with Madison Youth Family Services to do a community asset and survey. And Scott Cochran and Justin Ziegler are here tonight to present the results of that data. They will present multi-years of results, and so it's always important to look at the multi-years. And I know they will cover this point, but I always want to share that too. These are information that's reflective of the Madison community. I think oftentimes we think of Daniel Hand as being the place where the data comes from. It's really about the community and our community resources and the work that we do. And this is one of our most important partnerships in town. I know Scott and Justin are in the schools, every week and working very closely with staff, and their staff are working closely with our staff. So it's really a great partnership that benefits all of our students and families. They're the people we pick the phone up and call first when we need some help. And so thank you for that ongoing support. We only see it here at this table every 2 years. But that happens.
If you want it to come more often, just let me know.
Thank
You guys typically have a pretty full agenda just on your own.
Yes.
Just to begin with gratitude, we absolutely partner as Dr. Cook is saying, and not just on any single level. So we have staff to staff interactions, counselors talking to counselors, prevention staff interacting with teachers. We partner across a whole wide variety of things, and we have programming now in every grade of the Madison Public School System, and we're really proud and happy to be able to say that. So and a lot of partnering at the administrative level, so the ability to talk to school administrators with central office, Dr. Cook, Gail. It's just, there's a lot that we accomplish, and we do a lot of the little things to make our relationships work, to manage everything that we're doing together. So gratitude there, and a shout out to your student reps and our student reps. I don't know if you know, but about once a month, these two ladies leave your meeting and they come and spend the next 2 hours with us. And they just do an excellent job. So just want to appreciate them both. And we'll get in, Justin Ziegler, Assistant Director, and we're going to get into the survey. We want to be really mindful of time, and there is we tried to limit the data to the things that we felt like were maybe the most interesting or important for you all to hear. We'll go through the slides. We'll try not to spend too much time on any particular slide and would ask you sort of old school to jot down a note or a question if you have. I think if we start getting into questions on a slide, we won't get through it. And we should have about a good 10 minutes or so, or however much time you want in terms of questions at the end of that. That sound okay? All right. Off we go. So we're from Youth and Family Services. If you're not familiar with it, us, we are the town's Youth Service Bureau that is actually defined in a state statute that sort of structures and creates the work that we do under our umbrella of operations. We have a positive youth development grouping of staff. Those are the folks that are back and forth with the schools. We have an outpatient mental health clinic that serves kids from 0 to 21. Not necessarily connected to our youth services, but more as a part of a human service function that we provide is Madison Social Services. So that's adults that's adults in the community all the way up to the point where they would be senior citizens, and then they're served by senior services. And an arm of what we do is drug and alcohol prevention, and that's the term made in Madison is our Drug and Alcohol Coalition. In terms of the survey, our main instrument is known as the Search Institute Attitudes and Behavior Survey. It's the same survey we've done for many years now. It in terms of a tool hasn't changed much in the last 20 years. So it does give us quite a bit of really good data, consistent data over that period of time. And in terms of this report, we are also, as you're going to see in some of the slides, we're going to share with you some other data points that we've gotten from other sources. And also important, what informs the work that we do is our many interactions that we have across the community with school folks, with other providers. So there's a bit that we feel helps to inform not just the surveys, but it helps to inform what we're reporting to you tonight. And also just so you know that a lot of our staff has very close ties to the Madison community, which I think is always important for folks to know. The tool itself, it's 160 questions. That covers a very wide range of behaviors and characteristics. Because 160 questions isn't enough, we add another 22 and an addendum. The reason we do that, the addendum is really ours. We create that. We have some questions that we do repeat. So again, we have some consistent data, but you'll see in some of the slides tonight, there are questions that we have that are important to us that are not covered by the main tool. So we want to make sure that we incorporate those. It's, as I said, it's a survey we've done over many years. Originally, it was done on a paper survey. The surveys since 2019 have been required to be online surveys, and that has created some issues for some students who don't always feel safe interacting with an online tool. We go out of our way to help students feel safe in interacting with both the surveys. And I can speak to that a little bit more if you'd like. In terms of some notes around the surveys, so both surveys, well, we have 7 less respondents to the addendum, and that might just be a handful of students finished the Search Institute survey, and maybe we're just too tired. As we go through some of the data, everything on here is as you would identify it. So when we get to the addendum, where you might see categories for gender fluid or non-binary students, you see those groupings that represents 12 students who identified in that way, and the LGBTQI plus, that's 77 respondents on the survey. And we point that out simply because you may see like higher percentages in certain areas, and just to know that that grouping is relatively small in terms of the overall population of students who responded. And this year, the survey was conducted on October 8th. That's around the same time that we've done it every year. We do try to get it in anywhere from October to mid-November. and the data is really, it's based on what the high school has available to do this during an advisory class. So we'll start with, we've kind of broke this down by categories. The first category is just a grouping of risky behaviors. 30-day substance use over time. So as you're looking at this graph, this shows survey to survey year. So 2018, 2020, 2022, if that's what you see across the bottom, the surveys were conducted in the odd year. So you see that's where the number is of the blip there. The blue is self-report of alcohol. Again, this is all 30-day use. So this is a question, have you used this substance in the past 30 days? You see alcohol at the top. The orange is vaping, the red is cannabis. Tobacco is yellow, and prescription drugs is green. And pretty consistently over the years, the lowest reported substance use 30 days past was tobacco and prescription drug use. So that's pretty consistent. What's notable, you see the blip where we went from around the point of the pandemic in 2021, where we did run the survey that year and numbers were down. You saw obvious increases from there, and now you're seeing trajectories and cannabis, vaping, and alcohol all going in the down direction. Obviously, that's good, and we'll talk a little bit more in terms of your thoughts on what that data may reflect. And we'll have more information about that too. We were kind of curious to see what else we could find for a comparison. So in the state of Connecticut, there is the Connecticut School Health Survey. That is there's about 50 towns that will conduct that survey. So it's a larger group of students. And so like we just took a look to see what that survey data would look like in comparison to ours. And what's good is the previous 30-day use is the exact question that's asked on that survey. So this goes to the Connecticut School Health Survey goes to about 3,000, about 3,200 students. So to give you a comparison, and I found this very interesting, like this is alcohol 30-day use. So you see our survey data is in the red and the blue survey data is that statewide survey data. And you see that the pattern is almost exactly the same in terms of year-to-year use. Now, they conduct their surveys in the spring. So we don't have a data point for the 2025. So it will be interesting to see if that pattern continues or if that maybe goes a little bit differently, but wanted to give that comparison. Also, they have a similar question on cannabis use. As you can see, again, the pattern is pretty similar. The Connecticut data showed a much higher increase from 23 to 25, where our students reported pretty level 30-day cannabis use from 23, from 21 to 23, and that's been reported. That's our data has gone down. It's been less reports of cannabis use. So again, this will be something we can track year to year using the Connecticut data as a comparison. Looking at a graph in terms of the grades and reported 30-day use. So this is all substances, percentages by grades. Alcohol is the first column, then vaping, cannabis, tobacco, and prescription drugs. And we broke this down by class. So green is the 12th grade, 11 is yellow, 10th grade is red, and 9th grade is blue. What has stood out to us, and now this is for the second survey in a row, what we're seeing is our sophomore class is reporting higher percentages of 30-day use than our junior classes. Prior to the survey, 2 surveys ago, what we typically saw was increasing rates of substance use, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, like you just saw that for the past 2 surveys. We are now seeing where you see a higher percentage of 30-day use in sophomores, and then a little lower in junior, and then you see an increase in seniors. in our conversations with student groups, with other folks that are involved with the schools, we are hearing and I think feeling that there are some things that are becoming more unique for sophomores that are kind of coalescing in that year that we think might be part of the reason that's resulting in that increase. And it is a point that we probably should be paying close attention to. This is the first year we wanted to ask more specific questions about gambling. You may be aware, on college campuses, this has become a really big problem. And aware anecdotally where we've had instances of referrals for counseling due to gambling behavior. Usually it looks like somebody's taken someone's credit card and it's rung up quite a bill. And that's when it starts to come to the attention of an adult. So we asked in the past 30 days, have you participated in any form of gambling? This is a question we put in the addendum because it wasn't addressed in the main survey. 108 students reported yes. To drill down a little bit more, the percentage of male to female on that 108 students, it's 95% male. We identified some questions. We took some questions out of a gambling rating scale that would look at problem gambling behaviors, and we incorporated that in the addendum. One of the questions was, do you spend more money than you had anticipated trying to win back? Another one would be after losing, having urge to return as quickly as possible to get your winning back. There are several indicators that would tell you there's more of a gambling problem. And we had 25% of those 108 students report that they have spent more money than they had planned, as well as 19% that had said after losing, they had an urge to return to win back losses. So that would give you an indication that out of that 108 students who reported gambling, there's a subsection of students who likely have some indicators of problem gambling behavior. That makes sense? All right. Yes. Well, keeping an eye on drinking and driving, 4% of students reported that they'd driven after drinking. They've driven after drinking once or more in the last 12 months. So this is drinking and driving among students. That's down from 7% 2021. Again, that's maybe I think that's supposed to be 2023. I think we went the last survey on that one.
Yes.
So that's an error. It's not 2021, it's 2023. I apologize. And in terms of another key data point that we were tracking from the last survey, 18% of our students this survey reported that they had ridden in a car with a driver who had been drinking at least once in the last 12 months. That is down from 23% that was reported in 2023. So, and just to break down in terms of male, female of the groups of students, of that 18%, 22% were female, 15% were male students.
Can I make one more? And
Yep.
on the students who reported that they had ridden in a car, that doesn't mean necessarily another student was driving the car. That could have been a parent, could have been an adult. It didn't specify student necessarily, just for clarity's sake. It could have been they were babysitting and the parent drove them home and it was the person was under the influence. So it's not necessarily a student who's under the influence driving them home.
And a good point to remind that, again, Dr. Cook pointed this out, these are attitudes, behaviors for students, and this is not just about what happens in the high school. This is about the full life of the student. We asked some questions about how many hours per day are students on their phones. And then we asked them to give us an idea of what they felt was the impact on their mental health. Again, first time that this question was asked and wanted to get some really good baseline. And we found this interesting. We don't really know exactly what it means, but I think it's good data for us to have. So so I broke down the percentages on the left side. So 7+ hours was 59 students. That was 9% of the overall survey respondents. 4 to 6 hours, 40%, and 1 to 3 hours was 312 students, so 47% of all the respondents. less than an hour, 25 students and 8 students reported they had no cell phone. On the right side is the impact on mental health. So this is that self-report from students, where you see no impact was the majority of students in terms of what they reported. So essentially saying they didn't feel any impact one way or the other. And then you see slightly negative, very negative toward the right, and then slightly positive, very positive. And I'm going to go to the next slide. So this is another way to look at that same data. So neutral is like 37.1%, and negative, so that included slightly negative to very negative, and then the positive includes slightly positive. What stood out was the even distribution of the report. I think I would anticipate that students would say there was a higher negative. You see a higher percentage of students saying there's a negative impact. And that did not happen. Felt relatively encouraged that we had a quarter of the students saying that they had a slightly or positive effect on their mental health from smartphone use. And I think some people could question that. Students do use their phones for much in the same way we as adults use phones. Like, it's connection, it's information, it's could be sending, positive affirmations to people. So there's definitely ways in which you can interact with a smartphone that could have positive impact. So just again, this is what our students told us. Another interesting thing that we asked for the first time this year: how strictly are your family's screen media restrictions enforced? So you can see on the far left, always enforced, usually enforced, was a higher percentage of the students. And then you see from sometimes, rarely, to not force, take a trajectory down. And if you look on the right side, and we are interested in this too, what would the students tell us about, do they follow home-based technology rules? And the students reported, and the greatest and what stands out quite significantly, usually I follow them most of the time. So, and then always was on the far left, that was around 18%. And then you see on the other side, sometimes the rarely to never. It does, I think, give us the idea that when parents set rules, that their kids are likely going to follow them. And it's probably a pretty good message for students and for parents.
And restrictions included what they watch, where they watch, when they watch, how they it was listed in the question of all of those things of well, this is what a restriction means. So they had a deep understanding of what that was. All right, so on our addendum, we use PHQ-4, screening for anxiety and depression, which is a tool that's used by clinicians fairly widely. Pediatricians, thank you. Screening for anxiety and depression. So the question is, in the past few weeks, how often have you been bothered by the following? Feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge, not being able to stop or control worrying, feeling down, depressed, or hopeless, or little interest or pleasure in doing things. So this is, we've asked this question the past few years to be able to track this data. And we go to the next slide. So if you can see from 2017, where it ranges from mild, moderate to severe, to where we are now in 2025 of 23.7 of the respondents said would be in the mild area. Moderate was 8.53 and severe 8.09. Clinicians would usually say that therapy or counseling of some sort would be helpful in the moderate to severe area. So students who would be in that range would probably, if it was screened, probably be seeing some kind of therapist or referred to some kind of therapist. These numbers are lower overall from pre-pandemic. Average from 2017 to 2025, you can see there 16.1 to 13.44, and lower moderate or severe from pre-pandemic. So average 11.9 to 2025, 8.3. So what this is saying, again, we can't say this is what mental health is in Madison with our young people. But we can look at our trends and we can look at what we feel is improving numbers. And we are happy about that and excited to continue to do the work that we are doing in the community to support our young people and their mental health. Continue with that, self-reported attempted suicide by gender. The blue you will see is total, red is male, and yellow female. And again, those numbers are trending down. We did break them down by grade as well. 9th grade, and if you see the little gray box, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. Our 9th graders had the highest report. And so that was a number that we wanted to call out and make sure that we're watching, especially since these young people will be taking the survey again in 2 years. So being able to track that number and look at that number. But these are self-reported attempt by suicide by gender, numbers tracking down. But again, such a serious topic, such a serious thing that every student in the Madison Public Schools, at least once in 7th grade, gets a program called How to Help When the Problem's Too Big. So about supporting a friend and seeking support. And then every student through the health curriculum receives QPR training, which is training that supports young people in supporting asking the question of, are you going to hurt yourself or are you going to kill yourself? Getting support and referring that person. So every young person is having these conversations in Madison because while these numbers are going down, we want to see them continue to go down. Eating disorders over time. Again, breaking it down by blue being male, red being female, and yellow being total. So one thing that, in this question, the way that it's phrased is skipping a meal in order to lose weight, skipping a meal or purging in order to lose weight. And so this is something that I know has been on our radar in Madison Youth and Family, and it's been on our radar in our community and talked about. And again, numbers went down, but it's still something that's very, we take this very seriously. And I think as a community, take it very seriously to watch and support our young people in making healthy choices for themselves.
Yeah, this is one of the slides too that shows you some of the impact of the pandemic. So between 21 and 23 surveys, you saw particularly around the girls, where this was a really big issue. This is a percentage of students who reported these behaviors. And so good to be seeing that come down.
The other, and just with a couple different things, gender sometimes is a driver for a lot of the questions. And one thing that we also are watching is the gender gap between how is it impacting male students, how is it impacting female students, how is it impacting non-binary students, how is it impacting folks. And so this was another one watching that gender gap close a little bit. So, but continuing to keep an eye on it. So continuing into social emotional health, again, self-reported self-esteem by male and female. Those numbers climbed. And another instance where our gender gap closed a bit. And then we did it by grade as well. Breaking down by 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And 9th graders are feeling pretty good. And as we talked to, there's some drivers that we were talking about, well, what's happening in 11th grade. It's a stressful time. There's lots of pressure on young people at that time. Sorry, Kate. We're here for you, girl. But there's lots of pressures. There's lots of drivers in our community about how young people are feeling about themselves. And tied in with those other ones, this is the first time in our addendum that we really decided to dig into a little more clearly appearance and how people are satisfied with their appearance. One thing that we like to point out, and this is why we said at the beginning, the non-binary and fluid students is a smaller population. But if you look, they're on either end of the spectrum. So either they're very, very satisfied or very, very dissatisfied, that population of students. So while that is a small population of students, that tracks with national data and is really important for us to watch because it really impacts self-esteem. But for the most part, most of our young people are sitting somewhere in the middle of satisfied kind of with their appearance. Again, something that we're tracking, collaborate, looking at it, how it collides with cell phone usage, with social media usage, how it works with gender, asking a lot of questions of our data as we continue. Perceptions of safety. We want to make a clear note on this, that we did adjust this question. So this is a question that was regarding sexual assault. In the 2025, or in the previous question, it had the word sexual assault in there. We thought that might be too triggering, so somebody might read it and say, I've never been sexually assaulted, when perhaps they would have been, or just that word brings up a lot for a lot of folks. And so we put the definition of sexual assault in instead. So have you had an experience when you felt forced to take part in a sexual activity without giving clear consent? And so put that question in. And if you look at the numbers, the 2021 is blue, 23 is red, and 25 is yellow. So tend to be trending down. And for yes once or twice, or three or more times.
And we only started asking this question in 2020.
Same thing with sexual harassment. We changed the question. And the one thing that, again, I can't tell you exactly why, but in 2025, if you notice the yes 3 or more times, the number shrank more than it would in the other trends. We've been asking our young people, why do you think this is? What do you feel it is? And various folks have given us various answers. And it's an interesting question to ask about when it comes to sexual harassment. Why has that number dropped off? Why, in a good way, I'm not saying like, why has that number dropped off? Why has that number dropped so drastically? Same thing with discrimination. Change the question again, and rewritten. So have you ever had an experience where you were treated unfairly, bullied, or made to feel unsafe because of your ethnicity, culture, or religion? The yes once or twice stayed pretty even. 3 or more times dropped again. And so again, we're talking in groups with our young people and focus groups and saying, can you tell us, tell me a little bit more about that. What does that look like? What does that feel like to you? And that's anecdotal information, but we are continuing to ask that question to see what else we can do to support those numbers falling.
So assets, so the Search Institute survey is based around measuring developmental assets. These are characteristics in any community. There's external assets as well as internal assets. They are found in relationships in everyday life of a young person. And it's proven they show more assets you have for each student, you tend to see way less riskier behaviors. So just looking at the asset report of assets, and this is really how the whole Search Institute survey is designed to measure these. We had an average of 22.7 assets per student, which is an increase of 2 assets per student over the 2023 survey. And you can see in the call out towards the right, we just looked at one class and compared their asset level from what would have been their sophomore year to their senior year, and we see an increase within that. So that tells us students, as they are going through continuing through high school, tend to rebuild more assets as they go along. In terms of some of the assets that we think are important for folks to point out, where we have some real strengths. So external assets, and those, for example, would be a student reporting high level of family support or other adult relationships. These are all higher percentages, and so they really stood out in terms of the student report. Youth programs, having time at home. And you can see in some of the notable increases from this survey, from the last survey, 13 percentage points increase on caring school climate. It's still a relatively low percentage, you know, I think the schools are probably, the high school will probably tell you they would like to see that number go up. I have to point out that there is sort of a natural resistance when you're asking a high school student how they feel about their school. So you do have to.
As they're
yeah,
actually
these-
taking a like 80-hour
Right.
survey, like.
So- Right, uh, good to see school, report of student safety increase, by 16 points, as well as, students feeling they have high expectations. Internal assets, as you see, some examples of what those are: achievement, motivation, school engagement, bonding to school, honesty, responsibility, positive view of future, really critical, assets, to have that percentage of students reporting. And just a few key ones, again, that popped out, two that went down, student reporting, I think that for that question, it's an hour of homework per evening. And reading for pleasure, and this is one that has continued to go down, survey after survey after survey. I don't think at the time so I've been around for 22 years for the town. I've never seen that thing click up, and I don't, and I probably shouldn't make light of it, because it is actually a serious thing where you're seeing students saying that they're not reading pleasure. If we did the survey in the summer, we probably would see a better number, but this is an October thing, so. And an increase, the student report of restraint. So this tells us we see increasing assets and we see decreasing concerns around mental health and risky behavior. So it makes, in terms of like looking at this broadly, it makes sense that you see the assets increasing and the risk behaviors decreasing. That's what's supposed to happen. And I think it underscores the work that we are doing. And I don't think I would, and some of you could certainly argue this, but I don't think I'd surprise anyone to say, like, it almost doesn't make sense when you look at the amount of stress and madness at times that is out there. So we have our young people and our younger adults are targeted by the algorithms for social media and marketed for alcohol, cannabis, tobacco, and vaping. Like, there are forces that are acting against the health of our young people, and yet our data is staying pretty strong. And I gotta tell you, that's the assets. And if you look at what we do in this town, the number of what is just normal culture here, the strong connection among sports programming and the strength within parents and coaches and folks, like, that's really strong. Performance and arts bar. You know, we've got programming and we have opportunities for young people to connect across all levels. The library, the programming, if any of you is not aware of what's going on at the library, it's incredible. And this is something I feel passionate about, that we need to always reinforce. We have a lot going for us in this town. We have the clean air, clean water. We have nature, we have distance between most of our homes. We don't have gangs. We have things that just sort of are very naturally almost endowed to us for how this town has developed. And we cannot rest on that. The more that we allow kids to get connected and the extracurricular, all of that matters. And it's really the assets that are going to keep our kids healthy in the face of all these other things. Sorry, I don't mean to soapbox you there. Things that we're going to continue, we continue to talk wherever we can with any groups that want to talk about the data, particularly with students. We're looking always to see how we're doing in terms of the surveys and the questions we're asking people. The critical feedback we get back from students about the survey is always it's long, and definitely concerns among students that the length of the survey may impede the integrity of the data at some point. So you could have students who are just checking off things, and so that's got to be a concern. And we go out of our way to message and help students to understand what they're doing, and still it's a long survey. And if there's a decision at some point, you know, we would make it with you, if we change the survey tool. We could get shorter, but we would lose probably some of the data that I think about. So, but that's going to be an ongoing question. And with that, questions or thoughts on any particular slide or? Go ahead.
I had a couple of questions. So the first question, has to do with correlation. Do you think, with the 2021 legalization of cannabis in Connecticut, did you see any sort of correlation with, increased usage? I know that it's not legalized for them,
Yes.
but,
So it's interesting in Connecticut, that's not showing up clearly in our data. Like, our data for cannabis use has remained pretty consistent over that period of time. You saw, I can go back to the slide, but you saw in the Connecticut data that there had been an increase over the last 4 or 5 years in student report 30-day use. It's still lower generally versus alcohol. It's gonna, I would foresee it likely getting close to the alcohol numbers at some point. It's gonna become more normalized and it's gonna be marketed much more as that industry continues to develop.
and then, my other question was, when you were looking at the male and female eating disorders over time, did you guys do any breakdown of like athletes versus non-athletes?
Thank you for the question. So, we are not able to do that breakdown because that's not one of the identifiers that students put in their, we get their grade, we get their gender, and that's pretty much it, that we get from them. Anecdotally, having conversations specifically with young men and young women who are athletes, we are aware of needing to support those young people and making healthy choices for their body.
Just because I think it would be a useful information or data to have, because I think with certain subsets of athletes, like say wrestlers, I think that there's gonna be a lot more of that nutrition restriction right before weigh-in.
Yeah.
And then, other athletes are very more into like more protein and more bodybuilding, more muscle building.
Yep.
And so I just think it would be an interesting thing to see, if the athletes are doing better or doing worse, or, just how that plays out. And then how our athletics department could support that.
And that's part of the, when we were saying we're always looking at tool, is this the right tool for us? That's one of the questions of, does this tool allow us to do that kind of crosswork? And do we need a tool? Do we need to either work with somebody that creates that kind of tool, or do we need to find a different tool that will allow us to do those questions? Because there are some questions that this tool doesn't allow us to do. And so we'd be able to say like, put a, what sports do you play question in there, and then be able to do that analysis. But then we lose almost 20 years of history data because it's a whole new tool, so you can't necessarily compare apples and oranges.
Could be a question. So, and as we think about the addendum from survey to survey, there could be a question that would help drill down on that. So we may not have to change the tool, but can think of the right question. And we did consider, so we do know that for males, it's not so much the eating disorder, but like what you're saying, it's about the appearance and the muscle building and things like that. And we couldn't find a good question to ask to get at that in this survey.
I mean, it is very specific.
Yes. Well, and there's research and some national data that tells us that that's a growing concern, or it's been a growing concern.
And usually that is not related to a sport. It's
Right.
usually a
Yeah.
water
Yeah, yes, yeah.
major.
How long does it take to complete the survey for students?
Would one of you like to
For
remember?
me personally, I think it took around 30-40 minutes, I believe, and then I did the first
Yeah.
one.
Is there any way to measure like time and test?
There is, so the Search Institute does, like, if, for example, if it's under, I can't remember what the amount of time is, if there's too much of a pattern or it's under a certain amount of time where there's clearly clicking on it, those numbers do get thrown out. And we have my brain is blanking me out right now, but we have a very low throwout rate, lower than the national average that takes this test.
About 3% of the
Yeah.
surveys get tossed. I think Lisa got, and then I'll come over here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Getting back to the data on suicide and
mostly online gambling and weed, I'm gonna go back to piggyback on what you were just saying. Do you ever, have communication with our state representative and our state senator about the way they're voting on the legalization of these two, of the legalization of marijuana and legalization of online gambling? I asked this because there was a horrifying quote from Bob Lawler, who was our drug intelligence officer for New England HIDA. And he strongly believes that we're going to see, now, I don't know if it's high school, he strongly believes that we're going to see a huge increase in young men's suicide within the next 5 years. And I'm not sure if you guys get political like that.
So
Very interesting to know.
we actually lobbied pretty hard against the legalization of cannabis, and not just from the town, but the across the Connecticut Youth Services Association, which is a association that represents 102 YSBs across the state. We as a group lobbied hard against the legalization of cannabis. I get to say that we were not as out and vocal about the gambling.
Thank you.
Yep.
I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
First of all, does the survey include like social desirability measures, or put differently, how confident are we that students are answering honestly and not telling us what we want to hear?
You know what, thank you for asking that question, and. What we are really focusing on is the trend, trends over time, and so saying, something that we're fond of saying is that. If they were not being truthful 2 years ago, we're assuming, this is an assumption, that same rate is current now, right? And that same rate was current 4 years ago, same rate was current 6 years ago, which is why we're looking at the trends as opposed to the precise numbers. That makes sense.
It's fascinating because you don't see major changes from survey to survey. You see, as Justin was saying, you see patterns, and if there were larger percentages of students being wildly dishonest, you would likely see bigger shifts. So like that, and that's what Justin's saying, like if they're lying probably about the same rate as they are from survey to survey. And I would say that's probably the central question whenever we talk about this, like how reliable is the data? And when we talk with students, we'll hear some students say absolutely took it very seriously, and other students who said that they went through it as quickly as they could. And you can decide. I mean, I think it's for everybody to decide how they feel like we did. We didn't show you the video that we show the students at the outside. We have students on that video. So we all message what the survey is, how important it is, how safe it is. So we certainly do what we can to message about that piece of it. And I think there's more that we can do too, that we will do.
And I'm sorry, you get it. Getting back to all the surveys, you've done this before, I can't remember, so where do they do this? I forgot again, or what time,
So they do it in their advisory group.
Oh.
And that's one of the things I think we can improve on. So we did a focus group with the student leadership class at Daniel Han, and we asked them for some feedback. And one thing that we heard in this survey, so in the classes where students were allowed to do it in a circle, there was a sense of those students saying it felt a little safer because there was nobody who could see your screen. Where you had students in rows, students expressed that could be concerning because then that's how safe you are in the room. And it's feedback like that. I'm like, okay, so the next time we do this, we can be more directive to the people in advisory. I think we also need to give a script to the teachers and advisory that they could say. Ironically, we used to just rely on that script to queue up the survey, and students told us that wasn't enough. So we made the video. And now I think we need both. We need for the
And
student.
donuts.
Yeah,
Donuts.
right.
That'll keep them there.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd stand on my head to help students feel safe with this, and that would not be a pretty picture, but I think it would, whatever we can do to help students feel safer.
Do you survey middle schoolers at all? Yeah, with a smaller
Go ahead.
survey?
We don't. There is a version of the Search Institute that's appropriate for middle school, or that's been designed for middle schoolers, but we currently do not.
It would be interesting. I mean, I think about the suicidality question specifically and the high freshman numbers. It'd be interesting to track that at the middle school level. And then, final question, sorry.
Oh.
I think that the question about driving under the influence was specifically about alcohol. Is that correct?
Is it driving one of the?
It's specifically about alcohol, yes.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to some of the points earlier about cannabis to track driving while high.
Yeah, and that's again, I totally agree with you. And one of the problems of the Search Institute is that we can't shift the language, and that is the way that it's written in the Search Institute language. And so that's part of our, back and forth with looking at the tool.
I wonder if it could be added to the addendum, just to,
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to see
Yep.
that.
One more question, 22, 23.
Can you think of a case where you're actually blindsided by something that didn't show up in the data? Or is there been a discrepancy between the data and what you see or feel or hear?
I don't buy the cannabis numbers. I think it's an underreport, honestly. I don't think that how significant.
Yeah.
But I think if there's an underreport, it's probably with that, being honest.
I would say, I wouldn't say I feel blindsided by anything. And for the most part, when I talk to young people in the schools or people who work closely with them, they can say, I think the cannabis one is generally one that people go, I think that's a bit of an underreport. But everything else, from my again, this is just Wayne Ziegler's experience, feels pretty spot on for what young people are talking about.
I'd be curious how you two would answer that question.
I agree, and I think that all the substances are likely underreported. I just think that doesn't seem like realistic with what I've observed and heard about what's going on. And I think that students are really hesitant to be honest about that specifically because it is illegal. And when it comes to other things, it could be seen as poor behavior, but you couldn't get arrested for it or something. So I think students are really nervous, oh, if I admit that I drink, then I could get called down to the principals, where you're not going to get in trouble for being honest about some of the other responses.
But even if that's the case, wouldn't you expect that trend-wise longitudinal study like this, it would be about the same amount of fibbery year over year?
I would say yes. I mean, you've got a declining school enrollment number, right? So the overall number of students, but I would have to say, yeah, you would likely see it probably pretty close. And you kind of, when you compare us to the state data, and if you remember that slide, our students were reporting, a higher percentage of students were reporting alcohol use than what was the state data. And it was reversed for the cannabis. There were people, but you saw a very similar pattern survey to survey.
And the other things I remember with Kathy Martin.
Catherine, yeah.
Catherine was also involved in this reporting. The last year she reported, there was, I think it coincided with when the debate about legalizing cannabis was raging. And there was concern that especially with the high potency of cannabis that's available now legally, and it's multiples of THC levels, and that it would be causing severe anxiety and depression even, and having the opposite of expected effect from what some people associate with marijuana, just calming and whatever. And it seems like the anxiety and depression numbers, at least this longitudinal studying, have trended down. So I wonder if that could be an indication that maybe there's not as much fibbing going on with that as we thought.
So and I appreciate that, Seth. I think we have increased the mental health resources and the social emotional support. I think the schools have done just an incredible job at getting resources and embedding things from day to day, class to class. So I think the numbers that you're seeing for mental health are improving probably because of that. You know, there's definitely a lot of evidence to show that the higher degree of cannabis use is definitely correlated with increases in anxiety and depression and other mental health factors, psychosis being another one. So I guess that's how I react to what you're saying.
But, and I actually, I'm sorry, and I'll get to you in a second, Diane, I'm sorry. But just kind of on the tail of this, and I'm glad to hear you say that. We, for people watching on TV or whatever, you know, this district and the board, did a very focused and intentional initiative addressing social emotional learning coming out of COVID.
Mhm.
And it was really from 21 to 25 that we did like a purposeful 4-year initiative to integrate social emotional learning throughout our whole district, vertically, horizontally, in every way we could integrate it in all the curricula, in math, science curricula, music, all of that stuff. And we haven't stopped. The initiative led to curricular and programmatic inculcation of that kind of as our culture in our district now. And I'm very happy to hear you say that it seems like maybe some of that work is working. It feels great as a board member, because I was wondering, and I was waiting with bated breath to see the results of these tests, of the survey this time around, to see if maybe some of those things, but it seems like all of it is trending now. That, you know, that could be, that could have something to do with something much larger and more broad than just the work we all do together with Youth and Family Services and in the district. At the same time, things have kind of been kind of crazy and hectic in the world. And so I'm almost surprised to see the numbers come down. And we have these students for 7-8 hours a day, or even more with sports and after school activities and stuff. So I am hopeful that what we have done as a board has really helped to turn the corner and to help these the incidence numbers come down.
Yeah.
Over time. Hope they stay down
Yeah,
and get lower.
Me too.
I just had a couple of other questions. So, when you looked at the gambling, and it says, you know, you put like sports betting, scratch tickets, card games for money, and online casinos all in one lump. So is there any way to tease out like how much is actually online?
So the we could get those numbers for you. The numbers, students would say yes, and if they said yes, then they would be sent to a question that was like, you know, which ones have you been engaged in? And so then they could choose which ones they had engaged in. I don't want to quote the number right now because I don't have it in front of me. A very high number of them are online.
And then, did you consider, because I know that the questionnaire is very long. And I've heard that from students in the past, that I think they get to the end and they get a little test fatigue where they just start. But would you consider doing like the addendum questions on a different day so that it's a little fresher, you know, or, you know, the more focused questions that are not included in the standard test that you have, that's more specific to our community. Have you considered doing it on a different day? And is that something that you would consider to be helpful?
Well, it's an interesting question. So the answer straight up is no, we haven't considered spreading them out. I mean, there'd be some logistical issues with that, just off the top of my head. And again, like queuing it all up for a second time, I think would be a thing, but like it's something we could discuss the next time around. If that might help with how students are responding.
And then my other question is, when you were looking at the self-report attempted suicide by gender, I'm curious if like you did notice that it was higher in the 9th grade. And so then when you find something like that going forward, do you like track by cohort to see, you know, how that particular cohort is doing? And then would you, you know, try, you know, talking to the principal or whatever for
Yeah.
intervention?
So intervention wise, you know, so this report, all this data goes to all our staff members at Madison Youth and Family, it goes to every, all of the high school teachers also get this entire report or get the presentation. And can get the report very easily as well. So for us, I know at Madison Youth and Family that are, like, we look at, okay, so what needs to happen? And this information directs our programming, really guides what we're doing, as a department. And I can say, for example, that suicide question, I know, one of the health teachers emailed me and said, can I get that data? What's that data? Let me look at that. I need to integrate this into my curriculum. So we are, in that way, that's how we're on the ground using this information right away. And then for me, who this is, a large part of my job is in 2 years, I'll be looking at that 9th grade cohort again and saying, okay, I'll go through this presentation and say, what were we noticing 2 years ago? What question was I asking? What are we doing now? And taking a look at what have we done on the school side, what have we done in Madison Youth and Family, what have we done as a whole community, and start asking those questions.
There are some assumptions that we do make as it relates to where our highest concerns are. So there are certainly students that are identified and are in counseling and are being, there's outreach and engagement that's being done for the students where they're showing any signs at all. One interesting thing we did with an addendum, I want to say 3 surveys ago, we asked the same question and we broke it down for ourselves based on how they identified for that LGBTQ. And what we found in that survey was a way higher degree of students within that population have reported the attempted suicide. And so we made an assumption at that point that just the number in that group was skewing the data for the whole population. So why we spend a lot of time and energy, again, in partnership with the school to support that population. We were doing that anyway, but certainly it was definitely emboldened by that data.
Sorry, a couple other quick questions for you. The sexual assault data was almost shocking that it was cut by half. And fantastic if it's true. So to kind of Galen's point, do you believe that that's accurate?
Don't think we have a reason to think that it's not, to be honest. I think that's one of those, and the difference in we would say, have you been sexually assaulted, and then say what the definition is. We just took the term out and kept the same question as to not lead, like as Justin was saying. We don't have anything that tells us that that's not, and I throw it back to our students. Do you have a sense that that might be is that an accurate report from what you would think?
I mean, I don't think personally, I know we kind of went over this specific topic. I think that it is definitely pretty accurate. I think the changing of the question might have helped a lot of students understand that the first time around they might have the word sexually assaulted, they might have fully understand what that meant, or might have thought that's what they went through. And then the second time around, I know they kind of took that term out. Kids might have realized it's something, I don't really know for the specifics of it going down, but I do think that it's accurate because I personally don't have reason. I haven't heard too much about it. I don't know about you to believe otherwise, but I think that a lot of kids also with that change, just the understanding of the word also might have brought those numbers down as well, because they might have been like, oh, I have not actually fully experienced that, and I think something with the context might have played a part of the role.
Can I ask the students, I know that you've only been in high school since we've started our social emotional learning initiative, so you might not have felt any differently because you might not have noticed a difference because you didn't have a wherewithal to know that things were different. But can you generally talk to whether you feel like there's kind of an encompassing effort from a student's perspective to try and help students get along well, to try and promote social emotional and like emotional IQ, and treating each other kindly and all of that? Can you talk to that briefly?
Yeah, I give a lot of credit to the counseling department. I think they've done a fantastic job supporting students throughout the 4 years. I know there's so many, well, I don't even know how many staff there are, but there seems to be ample because they're always available when students have concern. That also trickles down into guidance with a lot of the academic stress. The counselors have done a really good job in making sure students feel well supported for their academic needs, and then the counselors for social needs. So I think that that's been really important. There are Madison youth staff, and then there's also like their therapists, right? Yeah. I don't know the proper term for that, but there's just a lot of resources that are available to all the students, and I think it's really important that there's also diverse resources. So students who have preferences to go with male or female or different preferences are satisfied. So I think that's really important, and I do think it's a pretty collaborative environment, which is fostered by teachers especially. There's a lot of collaborative projects, even in math classes and science classes. All core classes are encouraged to partner up and work together. So I think that that's been really important, and I think students are all working towards it. Students seem to be very academically motivated. Maybe that's just my classes or my experience, but students are really willing to work together. And I think that may be impacted by sports as well, because I know some of my teammates have become my closest friends because you have that experience outside school, and in not just limited to sports competition teams like Vibe and even after school clubs. There's a lot of opportunity to get involved and get connected with students around the community.
You know what's interesting, thank you so much for that, Grace. What's really interesting to me too, and to point out the curriculum development and that this district has become more proactive at the younger grades and building capacities from a younger age. And I know that part of what we offer is the mindfulness. Like, so we have a staff person who goes in and is teaching young children mindfulness. So I'm curious to see how data goes going forward as those kids who are proactively supported in social emotional strengths then come into middle school and high school, and we get data on that. So there's a lot of good, and we should also shout out to the Madison families that are doing a really good job, and the people that are coaching, and the people that volunteer, and they're teaching classes, and they're babysitting, and they're getting groups of kids together. Like this is really a community that's doing this, and that has to be continually fostered. And we've been here for a long time, and we're happy. We could talk about this stuff all day.
Can I ask just one last
Yeah,
question?
yeah.
The identity-based discrimination question, do you also have subscale data on that? Do we know how that's broken down between ethnicity, culture, and religion?
I don't have those numbers in front of me.
Okay.
Yep, I will do a deep dive. Happy to, I'm technically on paternity leave right now, but when I get off paternity leave, then I will give those numbers to you.
I just wanna, on behalf of the whole board, thank you so much, Madison Youth and Family Services. And I always say this spiel every time we have this presentation. The presentation is so meaningful. Some years it's more scary than others. This year, the data are so much more encouraging, and that's wonderful. But the partnership, like Dr. Cook said, between Madison Youth and Family Services, this service that you provide is so important. And all the services that you provide in support of our youth and our student population, our teachers, our whole community, it's just phenomenal and so appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for the
Thank you.
time and questions.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thanks for staying to help out with that. That was useless.
Yeah, I'll just wrap it up. And thank you, great questions from the board, thank you, I hope that was helpful to have that back and forth. One of the things we always look at the numbers is even those that are going down, we'll continue to work on. When I look at those, it's really easy to do the math. When you look at the percentages, we have 200 students in each grade level, so and that means 20 students. So even though that might look good, like that's still, that's sort of ours, and that's information we share with the school counseling department, you know, the social work and psychology, and really do work on that. So those are great questions to think about going forward. Just want to give a shout out to the art show tonight that was at Daniel Hand. It was great attendance. Gail and I were able to make a quick visit over there, and lots of elementary families visiting the high school, you know, some for the first time. It was really neat. They show them how to get into the building and stuff. So, but it was very well attended, and some great art over there. In terms of the budget update, I know these are all items on your calendar. We have the second public hearing on March 31st. The Board of Finance has voted to indicate that the board's budget would be reduced by $100,000. So we are working on how to potentially address that through our budget process. You know, it won't be easy, but it was not, you know, the cuts that we've seen in some other places, and so we know that the Board of Finance is working hard to provide us with as much funding as possible and to meet the needs of our students. And so we will be working on that. We typically have acted on that after the budget has passed. The vote is on April 28th. So hopefully with a positive budget, we would then bring to the next board meeting our proposal to reduce that, and then the board would be able to act on that and set a final budget. So we are working hard on that, you know, as we go forward. So that's the update on the budget. I don't have anything else. That completes the report today.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions for Craig on the budget? I would also say that, you know, the town is helping us in other ways by, for example, helping to fund some of our incredibly high health experience and projection through releasing some reserve funds to help offset some of our huge increase there. So while ordinarily I would say 100,000 cut is kind of deep. I do thank the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen for their partnership this year in helping us to find ways to deal with a very unusual circumstance. So thank you. All right, board member comments. Seeing none, we'll move on to audience response to information presented. Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to speak? No, do we have anyone online? No, okay, thank you. Move on to board committee and liaison updates, starting with our curriculum and student development committee, Kathy.
We have 10.
Okay, so no report there. Facilities committee, Emily.
No, we have not met. Our next meeting is April 7th.
Okay, of course, finance committee, Galen.
We have not met.
Okay, the personnel committee, Maureen is not here at the moment, but there's nothing to report on personnel at the moment. Policy committee, Diane.
We have not met, but we have two policies for review that are action items this evening for the second read. 6.44.2, reevaluation of challenge instructional materials in library and media center resources, and 5060.1.2 non-residents.
Okay, thank you. Learn liaison, Galen.
Yes, I zoomed in on March 12th, and there was an audible sigh of disappointment, but I wasn't ready to have. We have representatives from Westford, Waterford, Old Saybrook, Essex, Chester, Stonington, and Clinton. The highlight of the meeting, well, it's not the breakfast because I didn't zoom in, but was a special presentation by the superintendent from Clinton, Marianne O'Donnell, who's been superintendent since 2016. And it's just very interesting to see the commonalities, differences, challenges among different districts. They too have lost some enrollment and have had to redistrict. The conclusion was that the enrollment is stabilized and they have significant demographic shifts for English language learners in Clinton. They've also doubled down on their career and technical education, in particular pathways, partnerships with regional manufacturers, and they've started a cybersecurity computer science project in school, which sounded really cool. What else did we cover? There were other topics covered such as teacher morale post-COVID, change in expectations for kindergarten through 12, legislative update from Hartford. And they too have, there'll be no surprise that other districts' budgets have gone up anywhere from 4 to 6.3%, at least self-reported, driven by increases in health insurance. And like us, they are awaiting cell phone policies from the state level. That was a very good meeting.
Any questions? Report, thank you. All right, we have on the agenda tonight a Board of Selectmen liaison report. Unfortunately, Scott is dealing with a family issue and is going to reschedule, so you should be able to be here over the next agenda, next meeting. So now we move on to the exciting action item part of the evening. I need a motion to recommend exploring future, we talked about this last week. In my at the town ad hoc facilities report. I need a motion to recommend exploring future uses of the former Jeffrey Elementary facility, including moving central office to Jeffrey, but providing no endorsement at this time for that plan. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Emily, do I have a second to start discussion? Second, Galen, thank you. All right, so I have a motion and a second, so we can open discussion. Does anybody have any questions or comments about this? Diane?
This is kind of useless. Jeffrey is not under our, we have nothing to do with Jeffrey. We turned the Jeffrey School over to the town. It's the Board of Selectmen's purview. We have nothing to do with it. Why do we even have this as an action item? I think it's pointless.
I'll tell you why, and there is a point to it.
Convince me.
Yeah, and you may not buy it, but
Sure won't.
the town is moving forward to try to ascertain the potential future needs of the district in regards to office space, use, case and all of that. Would like to involve the district, central office staff. And in order to allow Craig the opportunity to kind of participate in that and have his staff spend some time on it in order for the town to get an accurate concept of what would be required if central offices were to be moved to Jeffrey. This is our kind of granting authority to Dr. Cook to be able to kind of participate in that study.
So you're saying that if we said, no, we don't want Dr. Cook to talk to you about this, they wouldn't do it? Is this what you're telling me?
That's not what I'm saying. They did we as a board, we have a seat as a liaison on the ad hoc town facilities committee. So as a board, they're also asking us, like, can we get some showing of support for at least going down this avenue? And at the same time, it also gives, Craig the authority to allow some people to
But you
spend some
don't have
time.
a vote, you don't even as an ad hoc person on that committee, you have no say.
Well, they've been counting my vote in votes, so technically.
Yeah, but
liaison.
technically, I mean, is
And
that,
we're gonna have another liaison appointed soon because I'm not long for this board.
well, I'll say that I have an idea what that's, what it should be.
Yes, I know you
Okay.
mentioned it and it's an idea. Yeah, I know you've mentioned it, eventually having it
As a trade.
used as a training school for technical or something like that, trade school. So, and that's one possibility, and the town is serving on the ad hoc town facilities committee. The town is primarily looking right now at potentially housing Madison Youth and Family Services in that northern section.
No, I knew
Of
that.
the building.
They wanted to.
And then the question is what to do with the rest of the main building after likely getting rid of those portables
So if we moved out of here
use.
and moved to Jeffrey School or, what would they do with this?
The town might use it for other purposes that it needs. The town has identified additional needs for future space use as well, so. In addition to just, like, I know, my understanding is that, Beaches and Rec needs more space. They're like at the surf club now, and if the surf club's gonna be rebuilt, where are they gonna? There's a whole bunch of moving parts that the ad hoc facilities committee is trying to deal with. Because it came up, several years ago with the discussion of schools renewal and potential community center. Folks in the community were asking, how come we don't do long range planning? There's recognition that we do mid range planning, we do CIP for some capital stuff, but there was no. There's a feeling that there was insufficient long range puzzle piece, big piece moving kind of planning for overall facilities.
Well, it's just, right, facilities right now.
So, but the use of this building falls under the town. Or do the Board of Ed offices here fall under our purview?
No, it's a town building that our offices are.
So technically, they don't need our permission or our support to say, we're gonna move your offices to wherever we want to, that's just the way it is, it's a town building. Obviously, you would hope they would take into consideration what the superintendent wants,
That's why they want our vote.
but you don't need our vote for
They don't,
consideration.
they don't need our vote, but they would like this to be a participatory,
They want our
voluntary,
support, is what you really ask.
not political support for moving something. They want practical support for the concept of determining what the Board of Ed and districts' potential uses are and needs are over the 10-year, 20-year horizon, right? So that we're not excluded.
Let me throw this to Dr. Cook. So your comfort level with this is that you would feel better having us vote to say, yes, they can talk to you and everyone, and that, so that your consideration is considered.
So the answer to that is yes. I did not ask for this, but I would support it. It came from the committee in the
Yeah.
town, and so. But I always think it's better to have a seat at the table, just as we're at the table for this ad hoc committee, than not be at the table.
So
And it's it's not an endorsement. I just want to be clear. It's not an endorsement that the board is saying the town should spend money on Jeffrey for this. It's the continuation of a study that they've already committed funds to for us to be at the table. So that's where.
It has nothing to do with funds, it's just whether or not
Whether or
you
not
want you to
we're at
spend your
the
time and
table.
energies answering their questions and getting.
Yeah, I mean, there is a cost to it, they would sit down with Gail and say, okay, your current office is this, and you have 2 staff members here, what else would you need if we had some room? And so even at the end of the day, though, from what I've seen with the markups of Jeffrey, there would be additional space that we've talked about, like, could that be used for other things, but I'll be clear, obviously, we just decided that it wasn't a good long-term space for schools because there's so much money needed to be put into it. So it's a lot of money that it would need to be put into Jeffrey for us to even move offices over there.
Right.
Yeah, so for any use.
For anything.
Yeah.
So we live in a small town. They're good people. We operate in trust. But when push comes to shove, who owns the building and who can force who to do what?
The town always owns the buildings, so that's where it was beneficial for us with, in some ways, it's usually beneficial because. With Jeffrey and Ryerson, we were able to give the keys back and we paid for a half a year of that. Other times, I believe when Academy was closed, the board held on to the building for several years. And
But
paid
they
for
have
that
those
cost.
keys
But
too, right?
They do have those keys now, we've given those back a long time ago, but but I think we saw that we didn't have an immediate need for the buildings.
Would there be a referendum involved? Would there have to be?
Yes.
There would have,
There would have to.
yeah, yes, because you're talking about, millions and millions,
Yeah.
and more than 10 probably.
Bonding.
Yeah.
So the board, I mean, in my opinion, the board doesn't lose or risk anything by taking a participatory collaborative approach. Again,
No, we won't go.
I requested that the language specifically say that this is not endorsing any plan. And this is
We're not
just,
taking a vote.
We're not,
Just
we're
discuss.
not taking, no, we are taking a vote. A vote
We're not
to
endorsing.
recommend exploring future uses of the former Jeffrey Elementary facility, including moving central office to Jeffrey, but providing no endorsement at this time.
And put on there are possibly a trade school. And then I'll.
Well, it includes possibly a trade school. It says exploring future uses. What you need to do is contact the vendor that was hired to do the study and tell them you want it to be a trade school and
Well, I've
let them
tried to
consider
contact
that.
him.
Yeah.
Get much.
So, any other questions, discussion, or can we bring it to a vote?
I
Go
just
ahead,
feel like
Jess.
I'm a little confused and maybe because I don't understand the broader context, but I mean, I remember last time this was discussed, Dr. Cook mentioned that, you know, on his list of priorities, a new auditorium would rank higher than new offices for central staff, and I would agree with that perspective. And so, you know, everything comes at it's a complex system, right? And everything comes with other consequences, and so because of that, because of the unforeseen consequences of what this entails, I'm a little unsure exactly what we're voting for.
Right, or can you take that part out, just say explore future uses without the putting the.
I was just gonna say, I agree, and one of the reasons that. I'm in support of this is that when it does come to that, I would like Dr. Cook to be able to say, actually, if you're gonna spend $20 million. That's moving central office may not be our priority, and an auditorium at the high school might be, so I think.
So we're just saying we're allowing.
Like, we do want a voice at the table.
Yeah.
You're launching a process.
That you can have, yeah,
You're launching a process
we
that
want you
we,
to have it.
Gail would sit down with the architect and the consultants and say, this is an ideal world, what my office would look like. We'd have Aaron and, yeah, cause, yeah,
But no, that can make that decision without.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, they're either gonna move without us or they're gonna move with us. That's what this vote is about. Do we wanna have a seat at the table, like Greg said? And by the way, the auditorium at Polson is already front loaded. That's happening. So to the extent that we're talking about potentially an auditorium at high school, which is actually news to me.
So, but we have some discussions going on
Yeah.
based on the NEAS report,
Yeah.
and need. Certainly that, there's some discussions, you know, what would be possible with the high school.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is not,
It's not saying we support it, this is just,
exactly,
you can talk
Continue
to
the
him.
conversation.
allows us to continue being part of the conversation.
It's
Yes.
so loud.
You can get their opinions.
All right,
Good luck.
so I'd like to call the vote. All in favor of the motion to recommend exploring future uses of the former Jeffrey Elementary facility, including moving central office to Jeffrey, but providing no endorsement at this time, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Looks like the motion carries 8-0. Thank you all. Action item 9. I need a motion to approve the following policies. 6144.2, reevaluation of challenged instructional materials and library media center resources. And 5060.1.2, non-residents. Emily, do I have a second?
Second.
Diane. Okay, discussion.
So I just wanna start the discussion. So everyone was here last, or and Kathy, I think you were not here, but you probably, oh, were you here?
Last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. So it was a lengthy discussion that we had regarding specifically 6144.2, the reevaluation. Blah, blah, blah. So I just want to, I'm not gonna go through the whole thing again. Everybody knows where I stand on this. I'll just say that I think it's a policy that we didn't need to have, that I think Hartford has overstepped. This is not a problem that our district has, and so they're providing a solution to a problem that we don't have. And so I don't like the policy, however, state statute is requiring that we have it. I don't like the wording in the policy. And probably this is the first time ever, I'm putting forward as policy chair, policy I don't like, and I'm not gonna vote for.
Fair enough.
That's it.
And I would just remind everybody that we did get advice, and we sent it back a couple times to Shipman and Goodwin to kind of see about wordsmithing it, and their advice was, and please correct me if I'm saying it wrong, their advice was basically, yeah, like, that's how the statute is worded, and that's how our policy is
And it's not,
constructed.
it's not a change of definition, it was a change that I felt like that we could add or subtract things. But I don't think that went back to Shipman and Goodwin, and so that's one of the problems I have with it, because I really think that their definition or their description of saying that, well, the Board of Ed is then on both ends. I think it's the same thing for the librarians, same thing for the teachers, and they're just not counting them in, it's the same thing. And so I don't feel like saying that the Board of Ed member can't be on both ends is really a realistic or logical, rational argument for that. I don't think so, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of split with this because I've voted yes for policies I didn't agree with in the past simply because we have to be in compliance with state statute. But I'm feeling spaced tonight, so I'm not going there.
There are three aspects to the policy: acquisition, presentation, and challenging. I think it should be difficult to remove a book. I think that I think that not enough attention is spent to the acquisition end of it, which is kind of an art. You know, it's a collaborative process with teachers and I see nothing to prevent us from working on policy or maybe guidelines for acquisition while still complying with this policy. And the challenging of it. And that's a possible future agenda item. I don't like the idea of outsourcing
Yeah.
acquisitions to the American Library Association or anything like that. I prefer it to be in-house as much as possible.
I, on the other hand, feel like it's where we as a board lack professional education in this area, board members, we're not librarians. I think that librarians are especially keen and especially educated in curating appropriate books for appropriate age groups for the various school libraries. And since this statute is more about that than it is books for curriculum, which we approve as a board, I kind of feel like that's not an outsourcing as much as showing deference to a professional organization that does this for a living. And so I don't share the same concern as you, but I hear what you're saying. I think what you're saying is we could go ahead and vote on this tonight, whether it passes or fails. And in the future, should we be so inclined, we could consider potentially modifying the policy if the board felt like there was something on the acquisition.
I mean, I think it would be a good thing to take a look at policy again. But I know I've stated before, like, I feel like this is purposely trying to exclude the taxpayers of Madison who pay taxes for education in our district. So just to remove them from having any sort of, saying that they had a problem with a display or with a book. I mean, it's highly unlikely to begin with, and we've never had that in the past.
We have.
Oh, we have.
We have had members of the public that grumbled and stopped short of coming to a board meeting to specifically argue this. They've read statements during public comment that included, and by the way, I didn't like that.
Right, but saying that you don't
display.
like something and doing a challenge, because we already had a policy that they could challenge. And they didn't challenge.
But it's not like there hasn't been interest is my point. And we did have some really ugly stuff going on next door in Guilford that really
Guilford is
blocked.
not mess.
No, but the reason why.
You're saying the problem is not here.
The legislative purpose behind this statute was that there are a lot of districts where book banning has become an issue, and we may think, we're special because this hasn't happened in Madison, but if it can happen here, if it can happen there, if it can happen in Guilford, it can absolutely happen here. So I think it's incumbent on us as a board to adopt this legal requirement for now.
Yeah.
If there's acquisition side stuff that we want to consider, then that can be considered down the road. But I think it's kind of incumbent on us to.
No, I mean, honestly, just about every policy that we pass comes back again for,
Yeah, for
Changes.
revision.
Yeah, and it should, we're on
Yeah.
a cycle,
I mean,
Yeah.
even without that.
yeah.
So this one probably will.
So Lisa, did you have something?
Except I wanted to ask you, when you said we have had that happen before, but they never came to a board meeting. Madison or Guilford?
In Madison, we had people come to board meetings and read like statements that are public comment.
Okay,
Or make statements, not necessarily reading, just speaking off the cuff. That, and by the way, while we're upset about this other thing, which
Yeah.
happened to be demasking at the
Yeah.
time. Also, we were in the Polson Library and we
Oh, we
didn't
saw
like
this,
that
were they
this stuff is
parents
being
or
forced down our
public?
kids'
Well,
throats.
we,
They were-
except we also.
Parents of
spoke that
students
they
or
were parents.
We assumed that they were parents mostly because they were concerned about
It
how
was-
masking was
Yeah, it was
impacting their
Okay.
students.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
But
thank you.
but to be clear, when someone comes to a board meeting and wishes to speak, they only provide their name and their address to prove that they are living in town of Madison. They don't have to prove that they are a parent.
Yeah, but
Oh, well,
this
they
would call
said-
for having a procedure where someone would like do an application. And quite
There's
frankly, if somebody, if a board member knows someone who's upset and the board member themselves can't do it. Then you can facilitate getting a parent in the community who's a parent of a student to bring the application.
Also, this policy isn't stopping anyone from coming to a board meeting.
Oh, no.
As usual,
Yeah.
making a statement, I don't like this book. They can still do that as a town payer, town resident can.
Right, what this
So-
prevents is from them actually formalizing
Filling
a
out the
process.
process, but they can still make their voices.
Absolutely. They
Okay,
can email, they can call.
I'll still have that right.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, let's call the question. All in favor of the motion to approve the following policies. 6144.2 reevaluation of challenged instructional materials and library media center resources. And 5060.1.2 non-residents, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? So it's 6-2. Motion carries. 6-0. Okay, thank you. And that was, okay. Action item 10, motion to approve a donation from the Boynton family to Daniel Hand High School baseball in the amount of $2,600 for a baseball pitching machine. Emily,
Second.
seconded by Diane, thank you both. Any discussion? Thank you very much, obviously, for this
Very generous.
very generous donation. I just hope I'm not in front of it because I'll probably get hit in the head and walked. I'll take the hit for the team. Any other discussion? Questions? No, okay. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Action item 11, action item number 11. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the March 10th, 2026 Board of Education meeting.
So moved.
Just I get a second. That was Diane, thank you. Any requested edits? Going once, going twice. All in favor, aye. All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Any future agenda items?
Marianne, you're here.
Don't encourage.
Want donuts?
No, was it, we already got something for
Oh.
member appreciation.
Say something. Craig and Seth and I, we were in our, well, we brought our husband, right? Went to the Rotary Club dinner and to honor TJ, and it was awesome. It was really a nice night, a nice day.
And he's smart, that's all.
Yeah,
You should have
he really
said that during.
And he was so happy that we,
It's okay.
that we had that table.
Yeah,
He was really pleased. So,
Yeah.
it was very nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, he deserved it.
such a special member of the community. So, all right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:46.
So moved.
Diane, can I get a second?
Second,
Lisa. All in favor, aye, all opposed, nay, any abstentions?